And I wanted to kind of talk to you about the different processes that were a part of A Ghost Waits, which is such a wonderful film.
Oh, thank
I
you.
really enjoyed this film, and I actually did watch it as part of Fright Fest quite a while ago. And
Yeah, August of last year.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And it just feels like forever and a day ago at this
it
point.
really does. Yeah.
And it was one of those films that was a standout from that festival for me. And then watching it again as part of Nevermore in North Carolina, it's, making its way around the world, and it's so nice to see you getting the acclaim that you deserve for it.
Oh, thank you very much. That's very kind of you to say. It's been it's been amazing and completely ridiculous. I don't know. I was thinking about like how this all started, like going back to the end of 2019 and beginning of nope, yep, beginning of 2020. God, it's so weird that like to think that any part of 2020 wasn't mired in quarantine. Um, but like I never heard of Fright Fest. McLeod had a few movies, had a couple movies play there, and had met a couple of the directors at another film festival, and just really loved them. And so he had submitted us to Fright Fest. And so the first time I ever heard about Fright Fest was an email telling me that we were in. And I was
Wow.
like, "Oh, cool! I should learn about these guys." And fortunately, there was a documentary about them that had just hit like Prime. So I think like at Christmas, my dad and I watched it, and I just thought like, and it was funny because like I'd been corresponding with them and getting little emails like Greg like was the last of the guys to see it and emailing me to let me know that I made him cry, which I always enjoy hearing. For whatever reason, I love ruining days. Uh, but watching the documentary and just like putting faces to the names of the emails, like oh these, and you just like oh these people seem so lovely. And then to go to Glasgow and have just no idea what to expect. I'd covered film festivals as a film journalist and I'd worked them, like I'd programmed them, I'd volunteered, but I'd never been to one as a filmmaker. And I feel like we kind of won the lottery in terms of just like Fright Fest is such an amazing community. They're so warm and they're so welcoming, and so I was a nervous wreck. And it just like for a few days, everybody was like, "No, you're before the screening, like it was like, no, you're gonna be fine. Like even if it doesn't, everybody's really lovely." And then it screened and had this amazing response. And I started crying in my Q&A. But and that's happened so many times since, where it's just like, wait, what's happening? Well, this because like it's such a tiny movie. It's
Yeah.
such a tiny movie. We made like it was when we played Screamfest. Actually, I finally had the moment of like because they did like a drive-in thing so they could have kind of a in-person festival of sorts. And I remember sitting in the car watching it projected on the side of the theater on proper screen, and it finally felt like a movie instead of just like a project.
Hmm.
Because for so long, it took us 5 years to make this thing. For so long, it was just a project on my laptop that I was working on. Because it changed a fair amount. I guess like from the moment Muriel reveals herself, that all is pretty consistent with what we shot. But like we went back and did extensive reshoots for the first act because it wasn't quite there. It was pretty dodgy. There was a talking dog in this movie at one point. Like it changed.
A talking dog.
Yes.
I mean, I
Uh,
have to say, I like the monologue with the toilet to establish that he likes talking with inanimate objects right from the start. I
yes.
like that.
No, the dream sequences. Like
Yeah.
that was one of the key things that changed. The dream sequences were important because it bought us the third dream
Mm.
where she sings.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, but like, yeah, there was early on his childhood dog appears to him and they have a conversation. His dad appears in a dream. His ex-girlfriend appears in like these different these different people to kind of voice his insecurities and um all that kind of thing. And which is how we ended up getting to the second dream that, as it is in the movie, with like the dream bartender that's Muriel dressed up as him,
Yeah.
because they didn't work. But yeah, I mean, it was super weird and nonsensical there for a while.
What do you mean when you say they didn't work?
The dreams.
Oh,
Yeah,
I see.
the original versions of the dreams didn't work.
Gotcha.
Um, but, and there was plenty of talk of like, do we just get rid of this? Like, is the whole idea not working? And it's like, well, we can't, because when she, because she's controlling his dreams,
Yeah.
which is a thing that was not being conveyed early on. So it was like, yeah, we have to have her, like, that. Literally the first thing we shot with Natalie was that scene of her singing to McLeod.
Okay.
So yeah,
Wow.
it's such a weird process.
It sounds like such a weird process, and I love though that dream sequence of him behaving as her is sort of this lovely echo between the two actors, of McLeod getting to echo back to Natalie exactly what she was doing in her performance. And how much did they have to kind of coordinate exact mannerisms for that?
They didn't coordinate much at all in that specific way. They were amazing together on set, and like they met on set. We did not, I mean, McLeod and I had been friends for years, but Natalie.
So there was no rehearsal process,
No
because they have
rehearsal.
this amazing chemistry.
I know, we got real lucky.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I'd been a fan of hers for a while. I followed her on Twitter. Cold emailed her just like, hey, I'm working on this movie. I think you might be really good for the part. Because I just had this idea that, she's so effervescent and she's just so brilliant. And like, I felt like it would be kind of a Robin Williams thing where whenever he had to like sublimate his energy into it for a dramatic role, there was this like vibration underneath in the stillness. And I felt like she might have something similar. So, but no, they met on set. We were shooting the dog, the talking dog. And she was 15 feet, 20 feet away in my dad's kitchen having a makeup test. And like, that was like, hi. And then that was where they met. But then when we hit upon the idea to have her masquerading as him, and then we did a quick camera test to make sure we could pull off the effect, and we could. So we went and bought some clothing that could kind of mirror her aesthetic, that like kind of mirrored what the dress that she wears. And then he just watched, because he and I are producing partners on this, and like he watches pretty much every cut. He's watched every cut, and like so he has paid so much attention to her movements and her mannerisms that once we had the idea, that he was like, okay, I can plug into this. And like, so the way he holds his hands, and he now like, he'll look back and just be like, oh, I could have been more specific about this, and like all these little things. But that's just because he's an amazing actor, who also holds himself to a very high standard. But yeah, like once we had that, we had the footage of her, and she gives such a like defined performance that I think it was easy for him. I don't want to like put words in his mouth, but I think it was easy for him to kind of latch on to a few things and say like, okay, this is how I can kind of carry Muriel forward with me.
Yeah. And in terms of the writing process, I mean, McLeod and you were the writers on this together, right? And how much of his dialogue came from him? How much of her dialogue came from both of you? Because her dialogue is very unique and very specifically lovely and antiquated in this
Thank you.
beautiful way. I really appreciate the very old European style that it seems to bring.
Thank you. That was exactly what I was shooting for. So McLeod's talked about this elsewhere, but like the writing process, I wrote the movie. I had the idea. I talked about it with a few friends, but like we had the money, even though it was a very low budget, very, very small budget. We had the money before I had a script. So I was writing by the seat of my pants. So the voice of Muriel Have you ever read The Mysteries of Pittsburgh by Michael
No,
Chabon?
no.
There's a part in it where a character, like the dialogue is all grammatically correct, and for which, and to whom, and all that. And there's one little bit where like a cab driver says something and the main character just says, "I love you," because like the way that it was said. And so there were, like, when you're making your first movie at such a small level, there's really like no guarantee you're going to make a second one. And so it became like, what do I want? Like, if I only ever get to make this one movie, what are things that I really want? And part of it was just like, I kind of love people that don't use contractions and make a point of speaking very properly and using the Queen's English, if you will. Which is not to say I do that in my own life, even though I do think I have a more mannered speech than many. But yeah, so I wrote the script that we shot, and Natalie and McLeod riffed a little bit here and there. I'm not precious about the script. Like, I'm always just like, if you can make it sound better, or like a person would say it, please do that. I kind of know the point. Like, that's what in screenwriting, like I feel like your job as a screenwriter is to convey the point of each scene and the point of each character. But then it's kind of the job of the collaborators, and it's especially my philosophy with actors, that it's their job to know the characters better than I do. So, and Natalie really responded to that manner of speech. She really enjoyed the challenge of it, which was amazing because, I don't know, like, I'm nobody. Like, why would anyone give a shit? But she dug it. And so then when we shot the movie in like 12 days in August 2016. And then I edited the assembly cut together, and it was bad. It was really bad. It was like an hour and 50 minutes long, and just like, oh God, but the ending was good. So we're just like, all right, let's just tighten it up and get there. So once we kind of got it into fighting shape and realized that, okay, so from minute 34 on, it's good, but we did not earn these first 33. That's when we did the reshoots. Well, we had no money left. So it was just McLeod flying back to Cincinnati and the two of us. And then Sydney Vollmer, who played Rosie, would like come and help us some days when she could. And that was, so the script was written, and then like McLeod and I would sit at my dad's kitchen table and like go through, before we shot, we went through the scripts. And like the one really clear example I can remember is that in the scene where they've just gotten rid of Rosie and they're kind of talking feelings at each other. When she says, I will be made a shadow, or I may never recover from the demerit I will be assessed. I will be made a shadow. At first, it was just, I may never recover from the demerit I will be assessed. And McLeod was the one that like at the kitchen table was like, what demerit though? Like, what is that? What's she afraid of? And my initial thought was, well, let's call Natalie because this is her character. But she was doing something in Virginia actually, and could not answer the phone. And so we just thought about like what would scare her. And it was then that we kind of hit upon loss of self. So that was the first real, like, that's the first like very clear contribution. But then in the pickups, oh my God, I mean, he and I were just like digging through what worked, and then finding, okay, well, this is basically a payoff that doesn't have a setup. So let's figure out a way to make a setup. And McLeod lives in story. His day job is narrating audiobooks. So McLeod gives like the greatest notes in the world. And at one point we were driving to set, and I was just like, hey man, like, do you want a screenplay credit? Because like, you've really, like, this has a lot of your fingerprints on it now. And he at first said no. He was like, no, this is just what a producer does. And then at some point he was just like, you know what? Actually, yes. I think you're right. I think I am doing a lot. So like the dialogue, all that's me. And Muriel's very much me. I mean, the whole damn thing is me, but like, he is so good at taking my weird, funny nonsense and like saying, okay, but what does this have to do with the story? And like, either it goes away because it doesn't have anything to do with the story, or we find like, oh, it resonates in this way. And that's been like a huge part of it. I feel like, I'm so sorry, I feel like I'm giving like 20-minute answers to every question.
It's quite all right. I would
Okay.
much rather like a lot of information than none at all.
Okay, good. Like one of the coolest parts of this process, like by process I mean like the last year specifically, and like it getting out into the world, like the Blu-ray that Eric's going to be putting out has a booklet essay and a video essay, and I just proofed the booklet essay and I just proofed both, and it was just like, you guys make me sound so smart. Like there's so much stuff that like I don't even think I knew at the time I was doing, because it was such a small crew that I was constantly like, I was like a pinball, you know, just like what's going on over here? Okay, who needs my help now? And so you're not really like in the moment, like reflecting on like, oh, and then this will mean this and XYZ. It's all like, I always say I have like a prism in my chest, and the light hits the prism and I know what color I'm looking for. So somebody says like, what about this? And you're like, yes, because like it hits. Okay, that's the green that I need. Yes. Or it hits, it's red. And you're like, no, that's not right. But so like years later, you're like, oh, right, it resonated because, you know, I'm preoccupied with the damage that capitalism has wrought. But in the moment, it's just like, yep, that feels right.
But so I actually do, that actually brings me to one of my questions, because, you know, in terms of that video essay, what were things that seemed to resonate in terms of other people's readings of the movie that, you know, sort of took you aback right away?
So both of the essays have a thing in common, which is, and it's really something that I did not think about, but like on reflection was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's the capitalism angle.
Yeah.
Both of them kind of touch upon, I mean, the booklet essay is explicitly about this, but like, you know, because the introduction of the ghost of the, like the corporate structure of the ghost realm, you know, I think when I was writing it, like, so initially there was I have no idea how long this answer will be. I'm so sorry.
It's
initially
quite all right, because this is actually the answer I'm really, really deeply interested in, because I love the hierarchy and the bureaucracy of that ghost structure so much.
So initially there was a different ending, because the general idea with ghosts is that they're here because of unfinished business. So the original ending of the movie was that Muriel's here because of unfinished business. Jack helps her finish her business, and then she leaves because everyone leaves Jack. And I told a friend that, and both, like, and saying it, both of us were just like, "Oh, you can't do that. Like, people will be upset." And then, you know, as opposed to the cheerful ending that we have now. But like, so that I went back and I just kind of thought about like, all right, well, if we're telling a ghost story, like what's a ghost story I haven't seen? And, you know, the question of why do you haunt? Like because the question of why do you do what you do is just something that I think all the time and ask far too many people. And so the idea of inventing kind of a new answer, you know, because most of the people I know in life or have known in life, like if you ask them, why did you do that? They say, I don't know. Or it's what we do. Like we kind of cede a lot of control to our circumstances, you know, like whatever the best job you can get is the best job you can get. And that's not necessarily true, but it's like the parable of like the elephant, like the baby elephant being tied to a tree and can't break away, and he grows up and still feels like he's tied to the tree when he could easily just like move his leg and break the tree. Like I feel like a lot of people live with that, and that seemed like an interesting thing to explore. Is like, well, what if ghosts haunt because that's their job, you know? And And once I started writing that, and then it was just like that, I just became curious about like, how do you talk about it? And is there like an employee of the month that like, is there the part in the very beginning when Jack is like looking for somewhere to stay because his apartment is being fumigated is a very real thing. Like we were trying to, we realized in a pickups that like, oh, we never tell the audience why he can't go home. Like
But
we should probably
honestly,
do that. Well,
I
that's
mean,
real. That happened to me. Like my
yeah.
apartment, I was living in Cincinnati, and my landlord knocked on the. I was working third shift. I woke up to my landlord knocking on my door. I opened it up, and he's like, "Hey, we need to check your kitchen for cockroaches." And I was like, "I don't think there's any cockroaches." And then they moved my fridge, and it was just like an armada of cockroaches
Yeah.
because my neighbors had a huge infestation.
I
So,
mean, welcome to New York City, right?
well, this was Cincinnati, but yeah,
Oh, this is in Cincinnati.
yeah.
Oh, wow.
But
Okay.
so when it became like, why can't he go home? I was just like, oh, because of this. Like, and then, why does his boss think that like the guy he pays to clean up a building can like figure out how to get rid of a ghost? Like, oh, because if I'm paying you a wage for one job, that covers anything else that you might need to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I don't think I was really conscious of it, but looking back and talking to Isabel Custodio, who did the video essay, and Craig Ian Mann, who did the booklet essay, in talking to them, it's like, oh, right. Like I feel left behind as a member of a capitalist society. Like I've been very poor for a very long time. Um, and you cope, and you go drinking with your friends, you go to Blockbuster, buy a bunch of used movies, and like order, buy a shitty frozen pizza, and like that's your Saturday night, and like, and you find, and like, and then it's enjoyable. I'm not saying that's wrong, but like it is, as the masses, we are placated by, or we find ways to placate ourselves. And that was a thing that I didn't realize I wanted to explore. And then of course, once they pointed at it, and I suddenly realized, oh, that's in like all these other stories that I've written too. Like that makes sense. But it's so cool. I mean, you make them like, especially something that like, I wrote this movie, I directed this movie, I produced this movie, I edited this movie. Talking about this movie often turns into therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's like, oh, why is that there? And I was just like, oh shit, I hadn't really thought about that being there. Like, why is that there? Huh? What does that say about things in my experience of this of life? And it's really cool too that like, even though I am like as McLeod says, the mother of this movie baby, it's so cool to learn new things about it
Yeah.
once other people see it. Because I feel like if you're making art, you want it to be as transcendent as possible. You want it to be universal and personal. And I feel like I see a lot of people, a lot of filmmakers like get upset when people like put their own interpretation on it and say like, oh, I think it's this. And they'll be like, no, that wasn't my intention. And you're like, but isn't that small? Like if it has to be how you saw it, doesn't that make it smaller?
Yeah.
So that's been kind of the coolest thing, is like people really have like let this movie into their hearts and read so much more into it than I was conscious was there. Yeah.
Yeah. And actually that's something that I've recently been very fascinated by, is, authorial intent versus audience reception, and exactly, how, especially in the horror genre, so many people have a very specific intent in mind
Mm-hmm.
that is read so broadly by so many people. And I think that's what makes the horror genre so important, is that it can
Mm-hmm.
be read in so many different ways, in a way that I don't think any other genre of cinema is anywhere near as effective psychologically.
Well, I think one of the coolest things about genre storytelling to me is that like it's very operatic.
Mm-hmm.
You have your metaphor, but like especially with horror tends to be kind of the low cost of entry. It's like a portal for a lot of filmmakers because it's like, well, it's not that expensive to make fake blood. you know I'm not terribly interested in the boobs and blood aspect of horror, but I do I do understand that it's, you know, like why it works as a low cost of entry. But like it's it's opera. It's like you can't really be, I mean, you can be literal with it, but God, it's so boring to be literal.
Yeah.
Um, you know, you're not really like, the story of Jason isn't just the story of a guy in a hockey mask hacking up teenagers. It's the story of generational trauma
Mm-hmm.
and how do you deal with, like, you know, this kid who, I mean, obviously it went far away. I've seen Jason X, but like, yeah, the story of Friday the 13th is a story of trauma. The story of a mother who loses their child and can't deal with it and like has to punish those who she thinks represents the problem because maybe they'll kill someone else's child. And then that somehow changes into the kid being the monster. I don't know. But, you know, Frankenstein, you know what, like it's not literally about someone bringing, about a doctor assembling a bunch of body parts and then like lightning striking. It's about our desire to play God. Like, and I think that's what makes it so cool, is because I love romantic comedies, but like the metaphor isn't why you're there.
No.
You're there to watch like charming people be charming with at each other,
Yeah.
which is awesome. Like when that works, it's fantastic. But like, yeah, and horror, the another like what I think is kind of the coolest thing about the genre is that it's such a great safe space for outsiders
Mm-hmm.
because you're most people don't choose to be outsiders. You're an outsider because people think you're weird, and the reason they think you're weird is that you're genuine enough to share a thing that you're excited about that other people don't talk about as readily as you do. So the idea that you can watch Brian De Palma's Sisters and be like, "Oh my god, like I completely get what she's going through. Like I'm so glad somebody made a movie about this." And then you tell like your friends at school and they're like, "So you want to murder people?" And they're like, "No, that's being literal." That's not what it's about. You
Don't
know,
you get Margot Kidder's emotional journey in here, please?
I feel like that should just be like, that should be like when you drive into LA, that should just be on the sign. Just don't you get Margot Kidder's journey. um, yeah, like it's so exciting and it's so cool because art, like I believe that the default state of art is to not exist. You have to mess up a rock to make a sculpture. So like it takes so much effort, and this is where like authorial intent, like
Yeah.
there's the thing that you're wanting to do, but then there's also all the stuff that you're not conscious of wanting to do. But like, yeah, horror, you know, the people that want to make it because it excites them. Something about it, whether it's the boobs and blood or it's the operatic metaphors or whatever, or just very simply, a lot of people want to make a movie because they like movies. Um, and there isn't really a second thought to it. They just like, "Oh, I like that. I want to be part. I went into the party," which I think is kind of shitty because you're making people wake up at 6 a.m. because you want to do, because you liked Back to the Future. It's like, have a second thought. Um, but yeah, like it's there for anybody who needs it. It's a hug for those who desperately need one. And that was like, you know, in making this, like, because the budget was so low, we didn't have to worry about like any of the quadrants. You could like just make a movie for 9 people. So I thought like, well, what's a specific hug that I don't think people are getting? What's something that I wish I had heard? So the ending of the movie is very much tied to like my own struggles with depression and suicidal ideation and anxiety. Um, of just like, you know, I feel like we never talk about this, largely because if you ever try to discuss suicide in mixed company, people are like, no, 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 no. Like that just
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't happen. That's selfish. And it's like, well, actually, I think it's kind of selfish to make someone else's death about you, but okay. Um, yeah, like it's awesome. It's playing with cardboard paper when you're or construction paper when you're a kid. Like it can be anything. Art is so flexible and it's so elastic. And it sucks that like people keep wanting to make the same things because like, oh, this works. Like, let's make another superhero movie and not push the form at all. Like, why? This is hard and it costs a lot.
It does. It does.
So yeah.
And I'm actually really glad you brought up the ending, because this was actually something I really wanted to talk to you about and engage with you about, because I actually think it's a very audacious ending. I've recently watched several sci-fi films that implied that they were going to end with a character's suicide to be with the one they love. And then the writing all of a sudden pulled the plug on that to say, oh no, we want everybody to be alive and to, like, you know, say no to suicide and and so forth. And there is this weird tension between, do you show, you know, why someone would commit suicide, why exactly that idea is there in someone's mind, or do you show it as delusion and, you know, pulling the plug at the last minute? And it's this weird sort of tension, and I wondered how you balanced that in your mind when you were writing that.
That's a really interesting point. And I would, if you have a chance, send me the movies that you're referring to, because I'm curious to see them.
Okay.
I I am not a provocateur. I really didn't think it was going to be controversial. I don't know why I didn't think that. But like, it's a very honest ending, which I think is to acutely answer your question. That was the North Star, was just like honesty and simplicity. The reason that I felt I could do that was because it's a ghost story. There's an afterlife. In the context of the story, he's basically just moving to Denver for a girl.
Yeah.
So, but again, it's the metaphor. Like you take that and you execute it in a way that allows people to empathize with a societal taboo. You know, did you ever see the movie Happiness?
Of course.
Okay. Dylan Baker's character in that is a pedophile. And like, obviously, like, you should not do that.
Yeah.
But the point of the movie is not to say people should be pedophiles. The point of the movie is to say people should empathize with pedophiles, because there is a struggle this person is going through and they don't feel like they can talk to anyone about it. Because if he were to say, hey, I kind of want to bone my son's friend, like, he would be put in jail.
Yeah.
But like, that sucks. Like, how many kids would be saved if people could just talk about their struggle? With suicide, it's the same thing. You know, yeah, it sucks to be left behind. My friend Stephanie, like, killed herself a few years back. And, you know, she's one of a few friends I've had that have done this. But like, I was devastated when it happened. And it's so easy to dwell on your own devastation and mythologize your own loss and not think about the struggle this person must have been going through that led them to this, to this decision and this action. And because I've struggled with it myself and have come very close a few times, to the point that, no, we won't get into that, but I've struggled with it myself a lot. And so I know what it is to get to that point of, you know, it's not even woe is me. That's the problem. Like, people who don't struggle with it think like, oh, you're just sad. Oh, well, maybe you should get over it. Maybe you should try being happy. And you're like, maybe you should try fucking yourself. Because like, it's not sadness. It is, I am an existential mistake. There is not a place for me in this world. Everyone else seems to be making this work and I am not. And I can't put my finger on why. I just know that I'm not a person. And that's really hard to say. And it's really hard to tell somebody because like, how do you even start that conversation? Like, hey, do you have a few minutes? Like, what are you doing right now? Because I need to talk, but like, it's gonna kind of ruin your day a bit, and I apologize for that. So, you know, like making a movie is a privilege, but it's also like, I do think there's some sort of artistic duty that like, okay, I have 80 minutes of your time, 80 uninterrupted minutes of your time. Let me talk to you about something that means a lot to me and see if I can foster a conversation. Because like, and there have been plenty of people, well, I don't know that plenty is the right word, but there have been some people that are just like, this romanticizes suicide, it glamorizes suicide. And it's like, no. But I get that your reaction is that way, or you're reacting that way because you don't struggle with this. Like, and congratulations on that. But like, you know, this is not to co-opt another struggle, but it's like telling a Black person they shouldn't be upset about slavery because like it doesn't affect what, you know, the modern white person. Like, well, that's a very different thing, you know, but like, I'm glad you didn't have to struggle with this, but the absence of struggle in your life does not invalidate the presence of it in mine.
Yeah.
And
well, I'm just going to say I found this ending extremely validating as someone who has also suffered from depression and suicidal ideation. And I mean, it's a constant struggle in my life. Mm-hmm. I always have voices running through my head telling me, you know, what to believe about myself and so forth. And to see that portrayed on screen was actually very validating to say, you know, this is where that gets you. Mm-hmm. This is what I've pictured in my head. And I'm actually seeing it in a way that is only ever depicted in like, you know, murder sequences in like Shadow of a Doubt or something. Yeah. You know.
Well, let me say how happy I am that I'm so sorry for that you also struggle with this. I'm so happy that you're like keeping at it. Like, you know, it's hard and you should be commended.
Well, thank you. Yeah. I want to give the same validation right back at you.
Thank you.
Because I mean, we both know how fucked up a world this is that we live in. And we both are clearly recognizing that somewhere within the recesses of our brains. And, you know, I mean, on some level, I feel like those of us who are deeply depressed are kind of recognizing things that other people are maybe suppressing.
I remember like telling a friend, like when all this kind of started, you know, it's like, well, I've always been an indoor kid. So like, I was kind of prepared for this, but then like when things became so existential and like, because I think the most interesting thing about 2020 is that I think most people flitter through life with very little thought and very little conscientiousness. And 2020 made everyone sit the hell down and think the hell about what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I mean, and you see how, I mean, people reacted and just like, nope, not doing that. Like, you know, unless like the state just demanded that you stay in place. Yeah, it felt really weird to be like oddly prepared for this. Mm-hmm. You know, I've been working from home for a long time. I've been a freelancer for many years. And so like I kept getting pulled onto like Zoom calls with friends and just being like, I get what you're going through. Like, this is what I do. Like, this is how I've kind of hacked my own brain to deal with this stuff, you know? No, I mean, obviously 2020 like was much more intense and I also hit my wall. But like, yeah, it's interesting when you kind of compel people to think about what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't like that. So, you know, I was saying like we've generally gotten like really good reviews. We've had some bad ones, and even the bad ones I love because they kind of validate that we made the movie we wanted to make, because it's mostly just like, this didn't do it for me, but like I get why people enjoyed it. And, you know, like no one, I mean, there's been very few like thoughtless or just wrong, like, you know, reads. It's just like, this isn't for me.
Yeah.
Which is fair. Nothing's for everybody. And especially this thing, like, I don't know if you're a big musical person, but there's
Yeah.
yeah. So you know, title of the show,
I'm sorry, who?
title of show.
Oh, title of show. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I thought you were saying Tyler LaShow, and I was like, what?
Oh, he's a doll.
Oh, obviously.
No, title of show has that song "Nine People's Favorite Thing."
Yeah.
I'd rather be nine people's favorite thing than 100 people's ninth favorite thing. Like,
Yeah.
there's a freedom to that. Um, and now I'm reminded, like, so J.J. Abrams is in the special thanks on this movie because he gave me a piece of advice like many years ago when I was interviewing him in my former life as a film journalist. Um, I I only had a little bit of time with him, and I was like, I could fill this entire time with alias questions, but I won't do that. Like, I have one Lost question. It's like, before Lost premiered, it's not like everyone was clamoring for an hour drama about a time traveling island. How do you do that? And he said, you have to have faith you're not alone in the world. If you want to see something, someone else wants to see it too. And that kind of broke open everything for me of like, oh, wait, yeah, because I've always been a weird kid. I grew up a sensitive little boy in like Northern Kentucky. So, I was wrong. I was always wrong. I was the wrong one in the room. And it took, the guy that made it took J.J. Abrams to be like, yeah, you're not. You're in the wrong room, And if Dan Harmon also says something similar, which is like, if you just go to the rooftop and yell, like, people will hear what you're saying, and like and for those for whom it resonates will respond, But it takes so much. What's the right word here? It's because it's not bravery.
But chutzpah? I don't know.
Because the vulnerability of like getting up and just saying what's in your heart, and being shouted down and being told you're wrong and keeping at it. Like, I don't know, but like that is hard.
There's a certain level of tenacity within that vulnerability. Like, you have to have both a shell of protection for yourself, but also openness to the world at the same time.
Yeah. Yes. Because like, especially if like with severe depression, like, it's so easy to kind of let things kind of calcify,
Mm-hmm.
And you're just like, you know what? Like, the world is bullshit. The world is wrong. And, I refuse to engage anymore. And which I think is actually like a large part of why we're into a lot of the trouble that we're in now.
Yeah.
Is people not feeling heard, and then being told like, you're not dumb, they're dumb. And it's like, we're all dumb in some ways. We all have blind spots. I mean, like, Albert Einstein was one of the smartest people to ever live. And like, they'd say all the time that like people like in the community just knew like, oh, he's just going to walk out into traffic, and like everybody has to kind of be aware. And like, he didn't, he wasn't great at dressing himself. And like, and what if like somebody had said like, no, like, Albert, this is the proper way to dress, and this is where you're supposed to cross. Like, we kind of double down on our own ignorance, our own blind spots, because we can't admit I think insecurity kind of governs a lot of this. We're insecure that like, if we don't know everything, then we're dumb, especially because we live in the information age where if you have a question, you can just look it up on your phone and like find an actual answer. But like, a lot of people can't deal with like being wrong. So it just becomes the like alternative facts thing of like, well, but like, this is what's right to me. This is what feels accurate to me. And you're like, right. But like, it's not fucking raining outside. It's sunny. So like, you can take an umbrella, but you're an idiot. Why are we fighting about this? Sorry, that was a tangent and not at all related to the movie. And I didn't mean to get you angry letters.
No, you're not going to get me angry letters. Okay, I don't think, because I mean, One of the things that I really enjoyed about this film was kind of the complexities of, the way that it dives into mental health in different aspects. And I didn't even know how much of that was deliberate and how much of that, or even early on in the film, I think there are certain cues that that's going on.
Yeah.
Within the haunting space, as well as the monologues to the toilet and so forth, where you've got, very clear references to how alone he feels and,
Yeah.
so forth. But it's like I said, I just found it to be a very validating film in this day and age. And I think it's really important in 2020 to be talking about these issues.
And like one of the interesting things that came up a lot early on was like, because McLeod and I have been really good friends for a long time, like Jack was written for McLeod. To the extent that if McLeod had said, I don't find this interesting, this movie wouldn't exist. Fortunately, we find a lot of the same things interesting, and we have very similar senses of humor. But like, then the thing became, well, McLeod looks like McLeod. So like, will audiences buy him as a depressed person? Because he's attractive and he's charismatic and he's charming. And I was like, well, not to be king shit, but like, people have called me that as well. And like, let me tell you about my depression. And then, like, not all depressed people look the same. It's not like we're issued a black t-shirt and a neck beard, at birth and like, well, go have fun being depressed. It's like, no, a lot of us like work really hard to not let you know. Amy Seimetz said this really interesting thing back when a few months ago when She Dies Tomorrow was released. She said that one of the things about anxiety is that if you tell anyone about your anxiety, you are then compounding your own anxiety, because then you're worried that you're contributing to their anxiety.
Right. Right.
it's like, yeah, it's just Ouroboros. It's just like, there's no getting away from this shit.
Completely. It's the snake that eats its own tail. You're constantly worried about the, anxiety you're producing in your friends, or in my case, when I was in high school, the depression I was creating in my own mother, as she was saying, well, the fact that you're telling me that, you feel like you want to kill yourself is making me want to kill myself. And it's like, well, this is the thing that people who have suicidal ideation, when they reach out to other people, are constantly afraid of.
Yeah, people think that it's that they make the talking the problem.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, no. that's yeah, no, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Yeah.
And it's, I think, really valuable to have media like this that is validating for people with mental health issues who really can see themselves in characters that, may find like their special someone, even if it's, a ghost. I mean, I on every level, I find this story both entertaining from, just a comedy standpoint. I think it works very well, but then you add the layer of bureaucracy, and the line that for me works the best in terms of the bureaucracy is like, oh, I have a different they, different they.
Yes, thank you. I don't think anyone's like zeroed in on that before. I like that too. Thank you.
Yeah, but where she says, well, they told me, and then he says, well, they told me. Oh, different they. But
it's sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, you go ahead. I'm sorry.
There's always a they.
Yeah.
They allow us to make a movie. They allow us to process or to load airplanes. They, and like, they devalue our contribution. They control the narrative of how we record society. They like, but you can't say all of that. Like, you can't, like, this movie would suck if it was just me lecturing you for 80 minutes,
about like, the they.
Yeah. Like, one of one of the key cinematic experiences in my life was seeing Mrs. Doubtfire, because I've always been a huge Robin Williams fan. I studied him in school because I used to do a lot of comedy, sketch comedy, and I perform a lot. And I've always like, I remember I got a gig in a theater troupe one time because like we were doing the like freeze game, where like freeze and you tag somebody, and I had like jumped through the air and somebody thought it'd be really funny to say freeze, and I just dropped a leg and like held that position.
Oh, I hate it when people do that. Oh my God, they're the worst.
Yeah.
Those people are the worst.
But like, you know what? Gauntlet thrown. Like, all right, I'll freeze in the middle of the air, like drop a leg and just stay. And, I remember like the director of that theater troupe, just like, I remember thinking, man, if this guy can get his energy under control, he's going to be a hell of a performer. And so I just studied Robin Williams. Of like, okay, how is he modulating his energy? Because he goes for 2 hours in these like stand-up shows, and like at the end he's covered in sweat, but he's still going, and turns out it's cocaine, but a lot of drugs. Yeah. But like, there's no like, there's no one answer to anything. Like, I mean, falling in love with a ghost, I don't know, love is love. Like, it's, like you can't, Mrs. Doubtfire, that's what. Watching Mrs. Doubtfire and like watching people just cracking up laughing and then just weeping, and like that was when it hit me that like, oh, you can like really land a punch if you get people laughing first. If you can make people laugh, they're very invested. Even if they don't realize they are, because they're just like, oh, this is a pleasant experience, my guard is down, and then you're like, but family, like, oh. And then, I was like, oh, that's interesting. So if I can make people laugh, I can then be honest, and like they'll hear it. I can't control how they'll react, but like when you never feel heard, that is the trick. Oh, I'll be heard if I do this. Okay. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. And you've managed to make something that's not with, Todd Solondz's chuckles that are, super awkward and
It's so much fun. Like watching in Glasgow, like again, it's the world premiere. I never sat in a theater with a bunch of strangers. Like we'd done like friends and family screenings, but that's different. That's a bunch of people that are like invested in your like good fortune and health that like want it to be good, and obviously like any audience wants the movie they're about to see to be good, but they're also like very willing to call it out if it's not. So to sit with like 400 strangers and like when they started laughing, and then of course like the toilet scene happens and like everybody's cracking up laughing, and you're just like, okay, this is good. And then the turn, and you start hearing like gasps, you start hearing like sniffles, you start hearing, crying, and it's like, okay, this works. This is working. And then like it was done, and people came up and thanked me for the movie and were really vulnerable and honest and open about their own struggle. And like, I didn't make this because I wanted to make a movie. I mean, I did want to make a movie. I wanted to since I was, for like 33 years now. But that, like I said at the beginning, you shouldn't make a movie just because you want to make a movie. Like have something to say. And so like that was the most validating thing. And I mean, yeah, we're winning awards and we have this great distributor, and we're we're currently the #1 movie on the platform. But like the thing I think about is the guy who came up and told me that he was excited to show it to his spouse because it was going to facilitate a conversation they'd never been able to have, because there was a tiny element of empathy lacking just because of like one-to-one understandings. And because of the way that it's presented in A Ghost Waits, he was like, oh, like this is how you talk to somebody about suicidal ideation and depression without really talking about it. That like, let me just, this is the puzzle, put the puzzle together. And then once you see the picture, like, oh, cool. Yeah. And that's exciting.
It is.
Hugely validating.
Yeah. Well,
And I get
I
to meet
mean,
people like you. Like my world became so much bigger through this. And like this is so lovely because when you make something so small and personal, you really have no idea if anyone's ever going to give a shit. So it's like Christmas every time somebody likes it and wants to talk about it. But it's also like we live and die by word of mouth. So the fact that people are like so excited that they get up at like 7 a.m. on a Sunday to talk about it, it's like, yeah. I don't know if you were like already planning to like go to church or something, but you know,
no,
I was just like,
no.
yeah, this is awesome. Like we can, you know, it's amazing. And I don't think I expected it. I know I didn't expect it. I don't even say I don't think like, but it's, I focus on this element of it because this is the important part of creating art is to engage with those who experience it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not enough to like making art just for the sake of making art has its points. You know, I have plenty of friends who in their spare time they paint or they sculpt or they write poetry.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do this in my spare time. I do this. This is what I do. And so like, do you ever see maybe Walk the Line?
Yeah.
There's the part in it when they're recording their first song and the engineer's like, guys. No one wants to hear a bunch of guys they've never heard before play a song they've heard too many times. He says, let's say you're walking down the street and you get hit by a truck. You're laying in the ditch, you're bleeding out, you're about to die. You have time to sing one song that speaks to your experience of this world. What do you sing? And that's kind of what I have in my head whenever I start writing something is like, okay, I may never get to do another thing. And that doesn't mean you can put all of your ideas into it because then that just becomes a jumbled mess. But like, what is something that I wish I'd heard at 15 or 25 or whatever? Like, what is something that I know is missing from the
Mm-hmm.
conversation? And I think that if you do, in my experience, having that as my kind of North Star, well, yeah, it's led to a bunch of these conversations.
Yeah.
And it's so cool because it means that we're not alone,
Yeah.
you know, and we would not have found each other without this.
It's true.
But like now we've found each other and we've connected. And like, that is the miracle of this life is connection.
It's true. I want to thank you so very much for this conversation because
Thank
this has
you.
been wonderful.
I'm glad.
And
I'm sorry to your editor. They're going to have to do a lot of cutting, I'm sure. But
oh no, that's whatever. Billy can deal. He can deal. But
sorry,
I but
Billy.
I also want to say that like part of what I do, part of my whole MO as a podcaster is that I want to create the connections that I never had earlier in life that were most meaningful to me.
Yeah.
Like I'm an openly disabled podcaster. I was basically on disability, unable to do anything but stay in my house for a full year before the pandemic started. So I had a good chunk of like dress rehearsal for everything that's happened since. And I decided at pretty much exactly the year mark, which happened to be exactly when the pandemic started, that I wanted to start a podcast and that I wanted to basically have those conversations that other people weren't having and to dive deeper into things that I don't hear people talking about.
That is a damn good mission statement.
Yeah.
Years ago, I was working as a maintenance man at a school and I destroyed my back on one day on the job. And so I was laid up in bed for months and, you know, then you start going to therapy. But like, I remember, and I knew about this like academically that it like existed in the world, but you know, there's people that the insurance companies hire to like kind of track you a bit and like make sure that you're not like claiming disability, but like then going out and running around and living your life and trying to defraud their company. And I get why it exists. I get that people do run insurance scams, but I also like, it's become kind of a governing thing in my life of like, when did we just stop trusting each other? When did trust, and not even like, when did trust become weakness? Because
Capitalism.
Yeah.
Capitalism.
Yeah, there's no room for the better angels of our nature in a capitalist society.
No.
You have to insist upon it. You have to insist upon dignity and respect and integrity. And then when you do that, you're shouted down because, well, that's how they get you. And it's like, you know what? You get to choose the kind of person you want to be. You get to choose how you process information.
Mm-hmm.
And you can either say the world is garbage and so I don't interact with garbage, or you can say, you know what, the world is trying. And maybe if more of us felt emboldened to have faith in each other and ourselves, maybe fraud wouldn't be as big a thing. Maybe, you know, we certainly wouldn't be storming the fucking Capitol. But like, yeah, maybe we should just try trusting each other again. And I know that sounds really Pollyanna-ish, but like, we've seen what the opposite does, and that shit is untenable. If we stay on this path, we're not going to be a country that much longer.
No.
And we might not even be a planet that much longer. We're just, it's like, yeah, maybe we should try the other thing, guys.
True.
And that's where the angry letters come in, because I'm a dirty socialist.
I mean, I don't know if I've definitely said very anti-capitalist things on this podcast. I don't know that I've actually said I'm a socialist on this podcast, but I basically am. So
power to the people, sister. Preach.
Power to the people. I mean, I've come clean about so many different things in my past, so I might as well.
Yeah.
So
I know it's kind of weird when you be like, you're like, I'm gonna be an honest person, but like every now and then there's a thing of like, I need to like, I mean, some of the stuff that I don't talk about is because it's not really mine to discuss, but then it's also just like, I gotta keep some stuff just for me.
yeah.
But you know,
but I still remember being told by friends who were podcasters not long before the George Floyd murder. I was on my podcast and I was saying, fuck that noise to All Lives Matter. And other podcasters were like, how can you say that on your podcast? You're not supposed to like swear at things. You're going to alienate listeners. And I'm like, whatever. I say fuck people who say all lives matter.
Yeah. If that's the kind of person I want to alienate, because that's the kind of person that confuses comfort with freedom.
Yeah.
You know?
And then of course they reversed position themselves, you know, like a month down the road.
So. Once it becomes, you know, it's the corporate thing. It's like now banks putting up pride stuff and like,
right.
You know, Black Lives Matter being, you know, on like a Pepsi can. And you're just like, okay, like this is not a bold move, guys. Like you've done the market research.
Yeah.
But it not being a bold move doesn't invalidate that it's a welcome addition. Welcome to the party. Black lives do matter. Thanks for acknowledging that. Yeah. We have a really hard time. There's nothing more true. I don't know. I really try to stay away from hyperbole, but like the fact that everyone is going through a struggle you know nothing about is one of the more true things I've ever heard. And I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's the job of art, I guess, to like engage with that and be like, okay, let's engage with each other's struggles and let's listen. And let's not like, if you're listening to someone talk about their struggle, that does not invalidate yours. But it's also that like kind of whatever it's called, on like on TV, how like if you're going to talk about one candidate, you have to talk about the other candidate, the fair time.
Oh, the equal time.
Yeah, equal time. Thank you. I don't know why I couldn't think of the word equal. Beyond me. But like, yeah, people think like, okay, so we've talked for 20 minutes about your depression. Now let me tell you about my struggle. And it's like, well, let's flip it. Like if you're talking about something that's really hard for you to talk about, and then someone says, okay, you're done now, let me tell you about mine. It's like, that's not like, I want to talk to you, but like, that's not what this moment is. Maybe. I mean, maybe it's the perfect time, you know, if it syncs up. But like, I don't know. Yeah, I see too many people thinking that like discussing anyone else's struggle is invalidating their own, and it's like it's not invalidating. You just have to listen, and like listening is not weakness. Listening is one of the greatest gifts you can give somebody, and I feel like we used to be better at it. But maybe that's just like the same kind
I
of.
hope we were, but
Yeah.
I don't know that we were.
Which is weird because like everyone listens to podcasts now, so you'd think we got really good at listening.
You would think.
Yeah.
You would think. But, you know,
No.
my hope is at least that the people who listen to me are actually listening, because I'm trying to put out, you know, fairly meaningful content that, you know, has something to say. So,
yeah.
Anyway.
But the thing is, like, even if they're not, so this might not sound like it connects for a second, but like,
no, it's okay.
I was talking to an actor friend of mine, and we were talking about nude scenes.
Mm-hmm.
I'd written a sex scene in a script, and again, I'm not here for empty titillation, so like it did a lot of things, and it was, you know, because I kind of think like, well, if you're going to ask somebody to take off their clothes on camera, like you'd better make it really worth it for them. And she had been on a show where like she had, you know, she played kind of a sex object almost. I mean, she had a real character, but like, yeah, she was the hot girl. And so she was naked on that. And we were talking about like, you prepare so much, and you work on the character, and you work on the scene, and you mine it for all the dramatic potential it has, and you make it as good as it can be, and it says something, and then some dude makes it a screen cap on a website. Just like, hey, look, her boobs, cool.
Yeah.
And it was just like, yeah, if that will always be there. People hear what they want to hear. People see what they want to see. So like, it's kind of on you to say something or to present something as purely as you can, because you can't control how it's heard. Now, I do think I spend a lot of time thinking about how people hear things so that I can say something to them in a manner that's going to lead to the smallest degree of misunderstanding or misconstruing. Yeah. But like, you can't control how people process information. So all you can control is how you present it. But you can do the work to make sure that you're presenting it as fully as possible. And then you just can't get it. And then, if somebody says like, hey, look, tits, then all right, well, that person wasn't going to engage with the conversation anyway. Yeah. And maybe them putting it there drives eyes to the show, and then somebody appreciates what a good actor you are because the scene is so good. And maybe it doesn't. Mm-hmm. And both of those things exist in the world, and you kind of still have to live your life. Yeah.
Yeah. And that goes back to the authorial intent audience reception question too. So,
anyway. Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm fine with people not catching everything that's in the movie, but like, yeah, like I said, it's Christmas when they do. It's just like, oh my God, thank you so much for being open to this. The thing I'm writing right now is this like time travel road movie with a bit of disaster movie sprinkled in, and like, I've learned so much from the process of making the Ghost Waits and editing it, and just like, okay, you don't need this. Like now I can kind of catch the script stage. Like, well, you know, you're going to be cutting this, so just cut it now. It's funny, the toilet scene that everybody loves in a Ghost Waits. We had shot that originally in principal photography, and it was bad because it was just my dialogue, and like, it was just, you know, there was a lot of wind up to get to the body of it, which is like, can I stay on your couch? Mm-hmm. No, you know, but if you ever need anything, let me know. Like, yeah, it's, and so I cut it because it was bad. And then at one point McLeod said, I think we really need it. I think it does some like expositional lifting that needs to exist. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay, well then we have to reshoot it, because there's no way I'm letting the world know I'm that bad a writer. And what we ended up doing was just cutting all the lead up and starting with, hey, thanks, that worked. There was a whole thing before that about like a computer fan and whatever. And it was just like, all you have to do is like, they were talking about something, it's done. Here's the point. And I was like, you know, you're like, oh, that's good to know now. And so when I'm writing a scene, I'm just like, oh, this doesn't do anything. Like, it's funny or like whatever. It's like, this doesn't really move the ball down the field. So let's just cut it and like go straight to like the point and like trust that that's enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It all goes back to trust. That's the point. That should be the title of this episode. It all goes back to trust.
It all goes back to trust. It all goes back to trust.
Because, I mean, again, like McLeod's my best friend. And this movie is not what it is without the trust of my best friend. Of like, I know that I can talk to you about this. You know that you can talk to me about this. Like, I'm not going to be precious about the words. But I trust you guys to make it like what it's supposed to be, and then they trust the material to get them to a space, like, and then you're making it and you're like, I think I screwed up, I think I made a bad movie, and you just trust the process. Then like it all does go back to trust, actually.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
it does. Well, I want to thank you again so very much.
We did like the Return of the King. We have like a few endings on this now.
We did.
Sorry about that.
We've had like 3 alternate endings, but that's all right. Like
Billy can make it like kind of a clue thing, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
But thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
No,
this was great.